Over 62 years ago, two countries were created out of the subcontinent. They've been the topic of much discussion and filmmaking, but never a film as unusual and different as the one that we're going to talk about today. And we're very lucky to have with us the one-person crew of that film, Sarah Singh. Sarah Singh, welcome to 24/7.
Thank you.
But one-person crew for a whole, a regular full-length film? That must have been grueling.
It was absolutely incredibly grueling, and it was not my intention when I was starting this film to be a one-person crew. Instability in India, which is not as much talked about, but in the last 2-3 years it has certainly increased. And if you put it in a context, you would see that the events that are happening in India are in some ways as destabilizing as what's happening in Pakistan.
But you know, Kashmir is a flashpoint really between Pakistan and India, which is why it's easy to say that, you know, if it happens there, it'll impact what happens in Islamabad or Lahore, and it'll impact what happens in Delhi or Mumbai.
Well, I think, you know, he was also connecting with Afghanistan and
again, it's a political connection.
I also was coming from this idea of the role that the U.S. is playing in the region, which, if you really look at it, you could very easily describe it as a dubious role.
Right, it's because the cinematography is phenomenal. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, you need a lot more. I had actually one person say to me, "Can I guarantee him 25%?" And I said, even if I had Shah Rukh Khan in my film, I could not guarantee 25% return.
What? You don't have Shah Rukh Khan in the film? No, you know, you said you went back to India after 9 years. How long did you live in India? Did you live there as a child?
Yeah, I was born in India in Patiala, and in 1974 we went to the U.S. and we subsequently made trips back to visit family, and then 94 to 97 I lived in Bombay for 3 years, and after that I went to New York.
So do you feel that, you know, living out of India for so long, there's some kind of a disconnect?
Most definitely.
Between you and India?
There is, but for me, interestingly, I actually have a very strong connection to Pakistan.
Oh.
And the interest in coming and exploring Pakistan actually goes back to 1995, when I was living in Bombay and expressed an interest to a friend that I wanted to take a train and go to Pakistan. I don't know where that came from, but somehow...
95, were we talking?
1995,
We
yeah.
weren't talking in those days, were we? I think there were some problems then. We
just
on the
met.
best of terms. I said we, Pakistan and India, yeah.
And what she told me, I mean, I was in my early 20s at that point, and I thought I was very adventurous, and I traveled all over India on my own. And when I expressed to her that I would like to go to Pakistan, she said to me, you know, you don't want to do that.
The mad lot will come out and get you.
So that sort of immediately that idea got completely shelved. But it stayed with me, this desire to come to Pakistan. And in 2004, I attended an event in Manhattan where they were discussing South Asia, and there was a gentleman on stage who was recalling his experience during the time of partition, and it was so vivid that I could see everything he was describing. And I realized, you know, I knew really very little about it. And of course, by that point, the U.S. was very directly involved in this part of the world, once again, but very directly involved. And the rise of India sort of parallel with this portrayal of Pakistan as this hotbed of terror. So it was you know, in that sense, an interesting cocktail of, you know, possibilities, you could say, for somebody who is interested in the region visually, culturally, and of course interested in politics as well. So things sort of came together, this idea of maybe exploring partition and being able to go to Pakistan and exploring the region in a way that people who are sort of reliant on mainstream media would never get the opportunity to have this kind of exposure. So
what's your region? Where does it go from?
I basically, the film covers Kutch to Kashmir, and basically Karachi to Khyber Pass.
So Kutch to Kashmir and Karachi to Khyber.
I was interested in basically Gujarat, Rajasthan, Punjab, Kashmir, and then on the other side in Pakistan. On both sides, they would ask me what's my angle. And
what is your angle?
I had no angle. My angle was to cover a certain region, meet as many people as possible, and what unfolds, unfolds.
So what unfolded, because your title is really interesting, The Sky Below.
The title
turned the world upside down.
Yeah, well, it references that time, because for many of those people,
it was turned upside down.
They feel the world was turned upside down. So it's about perspective. And
this film that you've made, now it's obviously not just for people who experience partition. You want a wider audience. So do you think people care about what happened 62 years ago?
Most definitely.
They do?
The train between Karachi and Jodhpur had just restarted in February of 2006 after 40 years or so.
Yeah, that's right.
So I was on the 7th train that went across.
Welcome back. So what's the relevance of our shared culture? I mean, I know Romila Thapar has talked about it in sort of very philosophical terms. But, people say that we have a shared culture, we don't have a shared culture. If we were always meant to be two separate identities, two separate countries. There's the Indus, and then there's the Ganges, and, never the twain shall meet. One flows this way and the other flows that way. The Indo-Gangetic plain, it's not.
The relevance is that, I mean, there's one very striking image in this which I think really defines that relationship, which is I was in the desert area in India, and then I was in the desert area in Sindh in Pakistan, and I mean, it was mostly, what happened was mostly unplanned, random. It was what was happening before me, and I saw a woman in this very vibrant orange sari with the white bangles covering the entire arms, with a little child, with this basic desert backdrop. Across the border, a month later, almost exactly the same thing. And so I, cut between the two, because it's such a subtle difference, but it's extraordinary to me, like visually.
62 years later, it's the same visual. And there's this clip from Shiv Shankar Menon where he says that the younger generation don't carry the scars of the past, and it's easy for them to move on as a result. So did you find that when you were traveling and you were talking to people, the scars are there?
It's inevitable. I mean, first of all, it's very difficult for people to go back and forth across the border. So right then and there, you're establishing a wall. And it is encouraging this idea of the other as the enemy. And so inevitably, that's the frame of mind, the frame of reference that you're going to have with the person on the other side of the border.
Our culture is what Meher Ghar, at least in this part of the world, in Pakistan, it's 8,000 years old. We're talking about Meher Ghar, which is this place they found in Balochistan. In Balochistan, and then you have the Indus Valley civilization, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro. I mean, they're ancient, and it's old, and it's phenomenal, and you've got all this fabulous stuff. But you feel that people really aren't in touch with that heritage and that culture, and they, as you say, people want to see the Taj Mahal, and they probably, if you ask them, have you seen Mohenjo-daro, and they'll probably say no.
Well, I mean, I think it requires a certain amount of imagination, especially with something like Mohenjo-daro. I mean, I've heard, when I was there visiting that, I heard someone sort of refer to it as just like, oh, it's just a series of boxes. But I felt when I was there that I actually could feel these people putting brick by brick. I could sense it, I could feel it.
But you know that the brick is the size of a man's hand. And that's the standard brick, and it's still used today. It's the same size. The Mohenjo-daro brick is the brick that's still used today. I mean, that's something that hasn't changed over, 5,000, 6,000 years.
The use of bangles.
Bangles, ornaments, all this stuff.
Even here in Sindh, I mean, the Adrak with the priest king, that they found traces of red and blue on his cape.
Okay, so
And
the same.
the pattern, so they believe that that's a continued tradition directly linked to that time period.
It's amazing. I'm sure there are hundreds of young filmmakers out there who are watching this. And do you recommend to them that they should go out and make a film all on their own, one-person crew, sound, lights, camera, the whole lot, script?
Yeah, if that's the only way they can do it, they should do it, but I don't recommend it.
Well,